In fact, of course, there is no secret knowledge. No one knows anything that can't be found on a shelf in a public library. Daniel Quinn, Ishmael. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski here with Ramya Amuthan. Our technical producer is Nisreen Abdelmajid. That was a quote from Ishmael by David Quinn. Ishmael is a book that we read a couple weeks back. A very heady book of philosophy where a man talks to a talking gorilla about the nature of humanity and what we're here for and the different outlooks on life that many of us have. And he separates everyone between the takers and the leavers. The takers being the people who do not recognize that we're not here to own the world, but that we're part of it. And the leavers are the people who understand that we're part of this world and we need to treat it as such. Very heady book, but I thought it was a fascinating read, even though I have to admit a lot of it went over my head. But today we're talking about the Center for Equitable Library Access. CELA has been a constant presence on this show since it started back in 2022. It so happens that CELA just passed its 10th anniversary, so we thought it would be a great time to dig a little deeper into who they are, their history, and what they offer. The usual suspects, McKay and Theresa Power, are here to tell us everything we need to know. Plus, later, Sarah Hillis is a huge fan of the Audies, the prestigious Audiobook Awards ceremony. She'll be joining us later to tell us about that, and we're also going to go through the 2024 winners from the ceremony that happened back in March 2024. Theresa Power is the Content and Access Librarian, and McKay is the Communications Manager at CELA. Welcome to you both.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hello.
It's nice to be here.
And happy anniversary. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so how about we keep it simple? Because we bring it up all the time, but we don't talk about it nearly often enough. What is CELA at its essence?
So CELA is a library service that provides accessible reading materials to people with print disabilities in Canada. So that's sort of our elevator pitch, our boilerplate. In its essence, it just means that we are tasked to provide reading materials in a variety of formats. Our goal is always to offer as much choice as possible, both in formats and in the books that we offer. And we started 10 years ago, and it's been an incredible journey in the last decade, and so many changes, both within CELA, but also in the sort of the accessible reading landscape. So we're really excited to be celebrating 10 years and looking forward to the next 10.
So if you're a user of CELA, you're fully registered, like what does it look like from the user's perspective to browse your library?
So we now have about 1.3 million titles. We're getting close to 1.4 million titles. And if you want to come and see what we have, impressive. It's a pretty fantastic number. We started with something in the neighborhood of about 60,000, I think, 10 years ago. So, that's a huge jump. And it's mostly thanks to Theresa and her shopping sprees. Anyway, so yeah, if you're a library user and you want to come and see what we have, you come to celalibrary.ca and you can search our catalog. We like to say that we have we're sort of like a neighborhood library, the kind that you would see on, in any sort of town, but that we have materials specifically for people with print disabilities. So we have fiction and nonfiction. We have short stories, drama, poetry, all the genres that you would think of. We've got newspapers and magazines. We've got 150 magazines, which are available within a day or two of when they're published and on the newsstands. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest changes for CELA users is just the incredible access that they have now to the information that they need, to the books they want to read, to the content they need for school or for work. There's just a huge opportunity to read pretty much anything that you want. And we're really thrilled with that because that's as it should be, that, people with print disabilities should have the same access to information as their non-print disabled neighbors. And so we're really thrilled to be able to be a part of that.
go back to what is available to people. You said, many formats for people with print disabilities, people in the blind, low vision community, and further than that. So what are some of these formats? Some of them, a lot of us are familiar with already.
That's Teresa's job.
Theresa, tell us more about your shopping spree.
How long do we have today to talk about my shopping sprees? Yes. I mean, so we have Daisy Audio, which is probably the most popular of all of our formats. So that is typically or preferably human narrated audio, although we have many books that are available in synthetic audio as well. And many of those come from our Bookshare collection. We have Braille, we have contracted and uncontracted Braille as well. We have that in human transcribed as well as in computer generated. We also have print Braille, which is a wonderful format where uh, we take kids' picture books, the physical books, and we insert Braille pages into that, so that allows a sighted a reader and someone who reads Braille to read a book together. It can also assist someone who is learning Braille for the first time in terms of helping, learn words, learn punctuation, learn spelling, and all that stuff. We also do accessible EPUBs, and from that we can also generate a number of other accessible formats like Word, for example, as well.
So you just named a lot of different formats, and I think
I
that can be
did.
kind of overwhelming to a lot
Yeah.
of people. Like, what is EPUB and Daisy Audio? Like, in other words, like a Daisy Audio is basically an audiobook. Is that right?
Yes and no. It adds far more structure to an audiobook than what you would get with a typical commercial audiobook. So there's far more opportunity if people are using Daisy players to stop at the beginning of paragraphs, at the beginning of sentences, um, to listen faster, for example. Yeah, and to like stop at different places, and more opportunity, I think, to stop in places than what you would get in a commercial audio with, I don't know, just like listening on your computer, for example.
You mentioned that Daisy Audio is the most known or like well-known format. Is there a most popular or second most popular, if Daisy Audio ranks for that one as well? Like, a lot of people downloading Braille, and do you guys keep tabs of different format popularities?
Ooh,
We do.
yeah, okay.
We do track them.
Pass the baton.
Yeah, we do track them, mostly for our reporting to the different funders that we have. So,
Yeah, I'd
but
be
I would say
curious
that
anyway.
I would. I haven't looked at it for the last year, to be honest, because I don't do the funding reports. But I think that the second most popular is Braille, and that would be I think it's refreshable Braille. I don't think that our print Braille, like our not our print Braille, rather our physical Braille,
Mm-hmm.
we have a very dedicated fan base for that option. It's interesting to me that people read different kinds of material in different kinds of formats. Like we have a friend, Kim, Kim Kilpatrick, and
Mm-hmm.
she says that she likes to read poetry in physical Braille, but she likes to listen to audiobooks. And so, it depends on what the needs are. But I think that the second most popular is refreshable Braille, if I'm remembering correctly.
Makes sense, I think.
Refreshable Braille, and that's for a Braille display?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And for those who aren't aware, a Braille display is a type of digital piece of hardware where there's like a line of Braille dots that are controlled by little pistons, like divots that go up and down. And as you press a button, it like refreshes the entire bar. So it's not, instead of printing out giant books of Braille paper, you just do it digitally in a way.
It's a really cool option for folks.
And it is also an option to get entire Braille books to get sent to you by the mail. Is that right?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we switched from having literally a Braille library where books sat on a shelf to what we call single-use Braille. So we print off a new Braille copy of a book upon request when a
Oh,
user wants to read something. So that it does a couple things. It gives everybody a fresh, clean copy so that the Braille is appropriately raised. It's not sort of the equivalent of being faded. It's not worn down, and you're not missing pages that might have been unfortunately torn out of a physical book or ripped or whatever the case may be, and you don't have to wait. Like sometimes Braille books, like any library books, end up under a couch and don't get returned when they are supposed to be. And so this new process that we implemented meant that you could get your books, within a few days rather than maybe having to wait a few months. So that was something that was really well received. And then you can keep them if you love the book and you want to return to it, or you can recycle them.
oh, you can just keep them. Oh, that's brilliant. Wait, how long
Mhm.
does it take to print a Braille book? Like, do you guys have an industrial Brailler?
We do. It takes some time. It's fairly resource heavy. Like the
Right.
process takes a bit of time and takes some resources. But if everything's running smoothly and your book isn't giant, you should have it in your hands, within a week or two. Just depends on what the quantity of requests are that we're having to Braille.
I'm just amazed at the amount of formats you offer. So like when a new book gets added to your library, you have to check off so many different formats. Like what does that process look like? Like Teresa goes on a shopping spree, buys a new book. Like what do you need to do for that book to be up on the website and available in all the formats that you require?
Oh my gosh, it's a really complex process. I'd have to say, like, not every book that we add to the collection is added in all of those formats.
Hmm.
So, I mean, one of the easiest ones I would say is like print braille. So, print braille tends to be kids' picture books. So, we're talking about picture books for a certain age range. So, typically, when we want to add those books to the collection, we are typically adding them in print braille. They're best for that format. They get description, and we can also keep the physical book and play there as well. And it's just a great reading resource for that age. So that's kind of an easier one. Um, we do a subset of our ordering for Braille and EPUB. Those two formats are kind of put together. Um, so we produce an accessible EPUB, and from that we can derive Braille. We do a human transcribed Braille from that. Adding EPUB to our collection is usually a fairly fast process, I would say. It allows us to have award winners available at the time of public announcements for people. And from the EPUB, we get synthetic audio, we get computer generated Braille, we also get that Word format as well. So we can generate a number of formats from it, make it available fairly fast. And then, yes, from that, we can do a human transcribed Braille as well. And that's just a subset. And then Daisy is probably like our biggest order if we're doing books from scratch. And that's all of your Canadian content that we choose, bestsellers, and title suggestions, and missing books in series. So we do all of that, and I have to say that that's all taking print books. We use an exception in the Copyright Act, and we ask CNIB, who's our production partner, to take those books and to make them into the formats that we want. That being said, we also have other avenues where we add books to the collection. That's through different partnerships and agreements, and also through Overdrive as well, which is a huge online resource for buying commercial audiobooks.
So because we're very proud of the rise in, like the exponential rise in how much you guys offer at CELA, thank goodness for the shopping sprees. We should probably tag shopping spree in our pod, right? It'll get
Tag
a lot of
more
hits.
shopping spree for me.
Anyway,
Yeah.
to make a popular episode. But I'm very curious about actual usage numbers. You know, how many people use CELA? Because we're so connected with the community, we hear that a lot of people in the blind low vision community use CELA, right? It's very well known.
Yeah.
We rarely ever have to say, you know, the Center for Equitable Library Access, because everybody knows what CELA is. But I'm curious about actual numbers.
So our actual readership, like the folks who are subscribed to CELA independently have their own account, that sits around 26,000. So it's not maybe as high as you might have thought. There's certainly lots of room for growth. So we know that estimates for the number of people who have print disabilities, which includes not only low vision or blindness, but also people with learning disabilities like dyslexia, and also people with physical disabilities that make it very difficult for them to manage traditional print, like turn pages and hold a book open, that sort of thing. Those numbers somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in 10 Canadians, so 4 million folks. And a recent Stats Can report from the government said that about 5.2 million people identify as having difficulty reading print. So the numbers don't quite line up because the definitions were different between those two categories, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 million people could have access to CELA. And so one of the things that we really appreciate is chatting with you and with other folks who are helping us tell the story about CELA, because it's a fantastic resource. We in Canada are incredibly blessed to be able to have it. I think we're kind of unique in the scope of the services that are available to people with print disabilities in Canada. And so we want folks to know that they don't need to struggle with reading if they have a print disability, that we have lots of resources and lots of books for them to choose from. So yeah, we have about 26,000 patrons, and we'd love to see that number grow.
4 million people are eligible, well, would in theory be eligible for it, but there's only 26,000 people that are actually signed up to it. And to be clear, this is totally free.
Exactly.
What do you actually need to qualify for access to CELA's library?
So that's sort of a two-part question. So for CELA, we go on the basis of self-declaration. So if you believe you have a print disability, so if you know you've got dyslexia, or if you have low vision, or you have something perhaps like cerebral palsy or Parkinson's that makes it difficult to hold a book, you can just sign up for CELA. We don't require any kind of medical approval or any other sort of authorized person saying that you have the right to use CELA. So if you need it, you can have it, which is a huge blessing. So that's for the CELA material. We also have a partnership with Bookshare, which is a big organization down in the States, and they have different regulatory parameters that they have to work within. And so to access the Bookshare collection through CELA, which is significant, it's about 1 million titles, you need to have what they call proof of disability. And so you do need to have some sort of authoritative documentation. So if you are blind or you have low vision and you have a CNIB card, for example, that would work. Or if you have dyslexia and you have, you've been ID'd through the school, your teacher or professor can sign off on that sort of thing. Or your doctor in the case of a physical disability. And so that's a little bit more of a longer term process to get your proof of disability and get it uploaded and get your Bookshare account. We don't have numbers on exactly how many CELA folks use Bookshare on a consistent basis, but it's pretty significant, and the collection for Bookshare is immense, and they have lots of things that we don't. Like, we don't carry textbooks in our collection, but a number of textbooks and academic papers and that sort of thing are available through Bookshare, because the focus there is for education. So yeah, you can get both of them for free. There's no cost for either of those. You just need your public library card, and then you're off to the races. You can read whatever you need.
Do you have any, like, obviously it's a collaboration because we have access to Bookshare products through CELA, but is there any say in what they have on their catalog? Like, is there a pass this request on to us or anything like that?
No, we don't make requests through Bookshare. Like, we don't call them and say, "Can you add this to your collection?" But we do see if Theresa can do it. We have ways for folks to request books, and Theresa reviews them all and uses her money wisely to meet the needs of our very diverse readers. So if you have something that you need, let us know and we can see if we can get it.
Oh, okay. So you could put in a request if you really wanted to. If it wasn't available in the library, we could reach out to you and make a request.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Theresa, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, how would you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few ways you can go about it. I mean, you can always call our contact center and put in your request that way. They fill in a form that's also available online on our website. So I mean, you're also welcome to just go online and do it that way too. It's the same form. And yeah, you just put in the title, author, series information. If you need it by a certain date, we get book club requests, for example. So people need books by a certain time frame. So you be sure to include that as well. And any other kind of important information, that you think might be relevant to the request.
Okay, that's really good to know.
You're going to be getting a lot of book requests.
Excellent.
Yeah,
we accept one book request a day per person, Jacob. So be keeping tabs on that.
It's in the fine print.
But copyright law is notoriously complicated and publishers will understandably cling to their titles. So, like, how is this legal? I know it is, but like, under what provisions is it legal to make all these books accessible for free?
So, back in 1997, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. The CNIB had lobbied the Canadian government to provide an exception to the Copyright Act, which allowed organizations like CELA to create accessible versions of books where they didn't previously exist. And so there's actually written into the copyright law, it allows us to do exactly what Theresa was saying, to take books that were not available in accessible formats and provide them to people who have, they use the term perceptual difficulties in the Copyright Act, but essentially it's people with print disabilities, so people who can't read in other formats. And that's sort of that's one of the ways that CELA sort of got started, is to allow for people to have a centralized collection that meant that libraries individually didn't have to try and do this process, because it's very, as we talked about before, it's very resource heavy. And so having a centralized library allows for people across the country to have equitable access, which is why we are called the Center for Equitable Access Libraries. It allows them to access the materials that they need for free, just like they're non-print disabled folks, and it's all legal. The publishers are careful, but they're also in many ways quite generous. I don't know, Theresa, if you want to talk a little bit about the Penguin Random House folks and what they offer us.
Sure, yeah. So Penguin Random House, we've been working with them now for, I think, a number of years. It's Penguin Random House Canada, actually. So they provide to us all the books that they're able to. So they have copyright to do so in Canada. They provide all of those books to us for free, basically. So it means that we get some great Canadian commercially available audio titles for our collection for free. And we get all of them that are basically available to us, which is really wonderful.
how does your funding work? I know you're a small organization, but you're not working for free. Where do you get your money?
That's an interesting question. So there's sort of three ways that we get our money. We get some from the federal government, and right now the structure of how that money is allotted is changing. There's a new program that the federal government announced about a year ago in one of the fall updates, and it's called the Equitable Access to Reading program. And so the specifics of that are not yet available to us. So we're looking forward to seeing what those funding options might mean for us. Traditionally, the funds from the federal government have supported, for the most part, our collections development. So Theresa's spending sprees. That's where the money goes from the federal government for the most part. And I'm just sort of speaking in generalities here. We also get some grants from the federal government to do special projects. And that's sort of from a different area of the federal government. And then we get funding from most of the provinces and some of the territories. The major exception is BC. So all the provinces across Canada fund CELA at a provincial level for all of the libraries. There's a couple of sort of nuances to some of those. And then in BC, we have a number of libraries that subscribe independently to offer CELA services to their users. And the number is quite high. I think we cover somewhere in the neighborhood of about 95% of the province of BC through independent library subscribers. So the funding from those three different sort of buckets of funding all go to support different areas of the organization. But the big one probably folks are most interested in is the federal government funding for collections development. And we've been really lucky because our new executive director, she's not new, she's been in the place for about 3 years, but our executive director, Lori Davidson, is really well connected across Canada with regards to accessible publishing, but also she's been working quite diligently to make connections sort of internationally. And so we can partner with and learn from organizations around the world that are doing similar kinds of work that we are. And that's been really great because it's helped us in a lot of ways that are kind of behind the scenes that folks might not see in sort of the day-to-day use of CELA, but things like Envoy Connect, for example, one of the new services that we launched about a year ago. We learned a lot from Vision Australia, who had launched it previous to us, and we've been working with other organizations that are looking towards launching it so that we all have the same sort of level of service and the same kind of options. And so that helps expand what we can do with less money when we're learning from folks who've already sort of walked in the footsteps before us, or when we can share projects.
Does it ever feel unnecessarily complicated that every country has to deliver these types of services on their own? And like, it's great to have a national centralized library like this, but like, wouldn't it be great if we could have something global?
There is actually something global.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. So folks may be familiar with the Marrakesh Treaty, which came into force in 2016, I think it was. And we were actually, CELA was actually, or Canada was actually the 20th signatory, which kind of pushed it over the finish line so that we could actually start to share books. So Marrakesh Treaty allows for different countries or their organizations like CELA within those countries to share books internationally. And there's a sort of a central clearinghouse that allows for that to happen. But basically, if there are books that we want, or collections that we want, we can go through the central clearinghouse, thanks to the Marrakesh Treaty, and bring some of those books to the CELA library. And we can also take books that we are able to share. So that would be ones that we produce that are, not ones that we purchase from publishers, for example. And we can put those on the global exchange so that folks can access those in other countries, which is really great. I mean, as we've said, Canada is really quite blessed with the services that we have available, but for some countries in developing nations, they don't have the same kind of access to library services that we do here. And so being able to offer our materials, the exchange not only helps us, but it really helps those folks who are struggling to get access to accessible reading materials in other parts of the world.
Speaking for myself, I get the vast majority of my books through CELA. Like, it covers pretty much everything that I'm interested in reading. And is that the case for you?
Yeah, most of the time I think that's pretty much the case for me as well. But I will ask, because I've always wondered about this. We talked about the shopping spree pretty generally, but like, why does it sometimes seem that like the version of audiobooks or Daisy Audio formats that we're getting off of CELA seem to be different, even if it's, the exact same book or a recent publication. It may be a different narrator than what you would get on, let's say, Audible or the most popular narrator of that book. Is that something you can speak to, Theresa?
Are you talking about like two different versions of the same title?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it could be a case where what we strive to do is to never produce from scratch a book in a format where it's always available. But that can be quite difficult when you're putting in orders at a specific place and time that doesn't necessarily account for what publishers may be doing like in that moment as well, working on, or what they might do in the future. So one possible answer is that we produced a book, an audio ourselves from scratch. So we asked CNIB to produce an audiobook, and then at some later point, we also got the commercial audiobook as well, which would account for two different authors. We could also have gotten a book from another producer who also did it from scratch, like let's say RNIB, for example, and then also had another copy from NLS who did it from scratch as well in audio. So again, two different narrators, meaning two different producers. So.
Okay, yeah. I sometimes see that there's certain books that seem to come from the RNIB,
Yes, yeah.
which is the CNIB equivalent in
That's
the
right,
UK.
yeah.
And I'm guessing if you have access to their productions of a certain audiobook, there's no need to go and acquire the one that's available on Audible or elsewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. That's the ideal scenario. Sometimes it doesn't always work out because of when we put in our orders versus when other producers might be doing their own work. We try our best to not duplicate that work. We don't want to, quote unquote, waste resources to do things twice. It's not always the case. And we are also a library that's been operating CELA has been operating for 10 years, but we have a book repository that is accumulation of many, many, many years and many different agreements from many different publishers and producers. So there can definitely be overlap because of that as well.
Theresa, Karen, I want to thank you both so much for your work and your time. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
That was Karen McKay and Theresa Power of the Center for Equitable Library Access. After the break, we're going to be talking to Sarah Hillis about the Audies, the Audiobook Awards ceremony. I'm Jacob Szymanski. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review. We'll be right back. Welcome back to AMI Audiobook Review. I'm Jacob Szymanski. I want to talk about the Audies. Not the cars, not the fancy cars, the Audiobook Awards. It's like the Grammys for audiobooks. Movies have the Emmys, music has the Grammys, audiobooks have the Audies, which, Sarah, do you know if these are associated with Audible at all?
Not directly, no. They are put on by the Audio Publishers Association, Audiobook Publishers Association in America here. So the association itself was founded in 1986. Mostly, interestingly, I looked up who was at the first conference that they had, and it was mostly not the people I would have thought like recorded books and stuff. It was like your Simon and Schuster's and your Bantam Doubleday, and like the ones that were doing all those silly abridged books all the time. This was a big thing because to save money on probably cassette tapes and to save money on for people to buy them, they would abridge them, and I kind of hated them. But anyway. And then interestingly, the word audiobook was made the standard term in 1994 by the Audiobook Publishers Association.
What was it called before?
Lots of people called them talking books, like which is what the books for the blind and dyslexic and stuff were typically called. So like there used to be a store in Toronto called Talking Book World, and I never went to it, but it was there, and I used to hear commercials for it. And then all of a sudden they were called audiobooks, and I was like, well, who changed that? I didn't know. So
Stevie Wonder had an album called Talking Book, and apparently the story behind that was that it was so long. They said, Stevie, is this one of your little talking books? And he said, I guess that's what we're going to call the album, because it was like a super long double album.
Yeah.
But if you don't recognize her voice, that's Sarah Hillis. She's our regular contributor. I didn't introduce her earlier. What else can you tell us about the Audies? Like, I know there are other audiobook awards, but these are clearly like the most prestigious because they've been around forever.
Yeah, I don't know that there are any audiobook awards like them. Like, I think there might be individual awards in other award things, like best audiobook in, I don't know, for like, I don't know. I've never heard of any other awards myself, but the Audies started in 1996. They were really just one of those, afternoons you'd just all go to your little hotel where they had them, and the publishing pundit would hand out the awards kind of thing. It wasn't for mainstream viewing. It was an industry event. But as audiobooks have really come into their own in the last several years, they started realizing that people wanted to know what the best audiobook was of the year and that kind of thing. So now it's on YouTube, and it's been there for several years now. I think I started listening to them in 2014 or 15. So yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we asked the right person to tell us about the Audies. I mean, like, what's the ceremony like when you watch it on YouTube? Is it a fun time?
It is a fun time. It's still very low key. Like, they don't have like musical presenters and all that kind of stuff. It's not like the Oscars, but you get a sense of everybody's, having a few drinks and sitting around, and it's really, everybody seems to root for everybody else, and it is a fun time. It seems like everybody, it's not like really horrible competition, or at least doesn't look that way.
Right, it's probably a lot less drama filled than the Emmys and the Grammys,
nobody's slapping anybody.
Not yet. Not yet.
No,
if I'm just picturing a bunch of people around the tables with immaculate voices.
Yeah. Well, all the presenters are usually narrators, right? So, and they say, and the nominees are, and then they have like, they usually have just a pre-recorded list of nominees that some narrator has done. So like, it's always very nice sounding.
What are the categories?
Well, we have audio drama, we have audiobook of the year, we have autobiography, and we have mystery, we have fantasy, we have sci-fi, thriller. There's no actual horror one, which I find interesting. We have romance, erotica. Goodness,
wait,
am I missing?
Is that romance / erotica?
No, romance, erotica. They're two different things.
Okay.
And there's a Spanish language category now. We've got best nonfiction narrator, best fiction narrator. There's faith-based fiction. There's literary fiction. There's
okay, wow.
Yeah, lots of different categories.
But I'm a bit confused because they're giving awards to the best audiobook, the best autobiography, and there's other categories that go to best fiction narrator and nonfiction narrator. So do these awards go to the narrators or the books?
Well, they do it like kind of like the Oscars, really, because really, when I was thinking about this just recently, actually, because I was sort of annoyed how it went this year, because they used to have female and male narrator, and then they would also have fiction and nonfiction narrator. but they dropped the female male now to, because of things, they thought that was too divisive or whatever.
Well,
So
there's no reason to separate it, I'd argue.
no,
I mean, a narrator is a narrator.
It just seems silly, yeah.
Yeah.
But when you get an actor and actress of the year or whatever, it's usually for something they did, right? Like the movie that they're in or something. So yeah, so they nominate the books for the narrators. So for example, in the nonfiction one, Dion Graham had 3 nominations for different books. So it wasn't just like their body of work or something over the year. It was just specific books. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Do you know how the voting process works?
Basically, the publishers will submit audiobooks for nomination in various categories. Like it's kind of like you probably have to fill out a massive form, I'm sure. And then there are judges. I don't know how those judges are chosen. I haven't found that information, but
sometimes they keep it secret, actually.
Yeah,
these awards.
And so then they whittle the nominations down to several finalists. I think it's like 5 finalists per category, something like that. And then then they pick.
And even being a finalist is an honor all of its own.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd like to touch a little bit on the 2024 ceremony that happened on March 4th. So we are a little bit late to this party, but I mean we made it. We made it regardless.
Yeah.
If you're ever looking for good audiobook recommendations, like specifically audiobooks, not just books in general, like you should look at the lists from past Audie awards, because they do recognize like a very big name books. And one theme that I'm seeing here in the 2024 winners is that there's a lot of big names. Big celebrity names has a lot of power.
Yeah, and that's different from other years, I would say.
Okay, that's not a consistent thing. That's just a 2024 thing.
It depends on the year, but like it just we had like the audiobook of the year wasn't some powerhouse of publishing. It was Bono and Surrender, for example, and that's largely because it was very innovatively done, because it's got music in there. It's got they purposely mixed the music so it would sound really good on your headphones and stuff like that. So that was the big thing about that book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we reviewed 1984 a couple weeks ago. Audible's audio adaptation of that one.
Yeah.
And that one published after this award. So I would not be surprised if it wins the best audio drama for 2025. It better, honestly. I'll be very surprised. But the one that won last year, 2 months ago, is Third Eye, written by Felicia Day. I have a little synopsis here, but this is a full cast production. This hilarious fantasy adaptation crafted by master storyteller Felicia Day is an epic and captivating audio adaptation performed by a full ensemble cast. Once upon a time, in the magical land of San Francisco, there lived a not-so-ordinary girl called Laurel Pettigrew. She was supposed to be the chosen one. The plan was simple. She would vanquish the great evil tyrant Tibus in epic battle, but destiny had other plans. That's Third Eye, written by Felicia Day, and that was the winner of the Best Audio Drama at the Audies in 2024, in case you're interested.
Yeah. And I forget who published that one, but it wasn't Graphic Audio. I thought it might have been, but it wasn't, so interesting.
Yeah, there's other people getting into the audio drama biz. I sometimes wonder if it's profitable, because they must be significantly more expensive to produce.
Oh, yeah.
I know Audible is pushing them a lot, though. Audible really likes having those on their platforms. Like they call them Audible Originals. They always have very good production value. Even if it's just an audiobook, they have excellent standards.
Mm-hmm.
The winner of the autobiography / memoir was Making It So by Sir Patrick Stewart.
Well, yes.
Yeah, of course. And he narrated and wrote that one himself. I'm not surprised at all that he would win that run. And then in the Best Fiction Narrator, it's The Last Lifeboat by Hazel Gaynor, narrated by Billy Fulter Brown. Here's a synopsis. Inspired by a remarkable true story, This moving and triumphant novel follows a young teacher as she evacuates children to safety across perilous waters. Alice King is not brave or daring. She's happy and fine through the save pages of books. But times of war demand great courage. That's The Last Lifeboat, written by Hazel Gaynor, narrated by Billy Fulter Brown.
Yeah. And the interesting thing I found out through this is that the audiobook of the year was not a thing until 2004. And the first 20 years ago, so the first audiobook of the year was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, narrated by Jim Dale, which we know Ramya will be quite happy about.
Right. So there's Jim Dale. Who is the other guy who famously did narrations?
Stephen Fry.
Stephen Fry. So did that come after? Who was the first to do those?
No, see, the Jim Dales are the American published Harry Potters, and the Stephen Frys are the UK published Harry Potters.
Oh.
So they're kind of the similar timelines.
So they came out at the same time. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well,
yeah.
So they chose the American narrator at the Audies,
Yeah,
which I did notice that there seems to be like an American-centric slant to this award, especially considering there's like the Spanish category, which...
Yeah,
like,
the Audies are from the Audiobook Publishers Association, which is basically an American association, right? So...
Do winners, outs. Well, I guess Sir Patrick Stewart won, so I guess that means they do accept winners from outside of...
But he lives in America.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's true. Rosamund Pike also won.
Yeah, she did. She won twice. She won this year too, which I was really happy about.
Yeah, and she narrated the three first books of the Wheel of Time series, right?
She did, yes.
Did you listen to those? I know you're a fan of Wheel of Time.
I did. I got into them because of her, actually. I haven't heard the other versions. But the things, like, it's more the books that won, not... Well, she won for Best Female Narrator last year, but then this was a book that won specifically. But they do things like where a group of people are singing, like they do multiple Rosamunds, and they make a tune-up, and she sings the drinking song or whatever. It's kind of fun.
Wait, so they just record her singing like 20 times and then...
Yeah, it's weird. It's cool.
I've heard similar things like that. No, you can get creative with audiobooks.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I love that. That's funny. So another category for the 2024 Audies was the Best Nonfiction Narrator. The book is King a Life, written by Jonathan Eig, narrated by Dion Graham, which is someone you mentioned earlier. So here's the synopsis. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, he's just a really good narrator.
Yeah, no, I recognize his name. There's certain narrator names that you just see pop up everywhere, especially if you're just browsing Audible.
Yeah.
Here's the narration of this one, the synopsis of this one, pardon me. Combining exhaustive research with brisk and accessible storytelling to forge the definitive life for our times, this vividly written biography shows a revelatory new portrait of the preacher and activist who shook the world, the courageous and often emotionally troubled human being who demanded peaceful protests for his movements, but was rarely at peace with himself. That's King a Life, written by Jonathan Eig. And narrated by Dion Graham.
Cool.
When I'm browsing Goodreads, I always see these things pop up. It's like as soon as you're a nominee for one of these awards, they'll include it as like the very first thing in any synopsis. It's very sellable. It's very marketable.
Yeah, and I mean, in 2004, or like 20 years ago, who would have known about the Audies, right? Like, it wouldn't have been that sellable.
Well, back in 2004, like, what was the primary listening method for audiobooks? I'm genuinely curious. Like, this is like...
It would have been CDs,
It would have been CDs that you play?
Probably.
That seems so archaic.
Like, so Audible started in 1997, and they created this, like, portable flash player thing, like flash drive that could play things. And so you could download books from their site and put it on this player. That was their big, claim to fame. And they were probably like, I don't know the recording quality. I don't know what it was like, but it mustn't have been very big because a lot of people were still on dial-up or DSL or whatever. So
right, to download an entire audiobook. I mean,
Yeah, it
with just a human voice, you can compress the files down to something
Pretty-
very, very, very small without taking
Yeah.
all that too much space. That said, on Audible nowadays, like a big book can take up to like 800 megabytes.
Well, I always use the high quality myself because my phone has enough space. So, yeah.
No, I noticed the difference too. But the
Yeah.
worst is when you go back to old audiobooks and they just have garbage audio quality. Probably because it was ripped from a tape.
They used to actually do an award for packaging of audiobooks. Of course, it like the
What?
the cover design, the packaging, the cover design.
Oh my God, that's cool.
But of course, now I mean there are still CDs available. My stepfather still buys them that way, but it's just less of a thing now.
I know that cassette tapes for audiobooks were really popular for truckers.
Oh yeah,
That makes sense, right? Because you'd be on the road all the time. It's like it's a
Yeah.
good gift to give your trucker parents. But I also wanted to mention that the Grammys have an award for spoken word album, which has
Yeah,
gone
they
to
do.
audiobooks in the past. Very
Yeah.
strange. Was there anything else about the Audies that caught you off guard?
Not really. I just always find it interesting. Well, the Spanish language category, I have to tell you, they picked Don Quixote, and I mean, it's like, so you pick the one that you knew about the
The
best.
one Spanish
like,
book. The one
I
Spanish
felt
book.
like, come on, like, did it have to be that one?
That's like picking the Count of Monte Cristo for French category.
I know. It just seemed weird.
It's a little stereotypical.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
ridiculous. But again, like I'd highly recommend anybody to look at these lists if you're looking for recommendations because they're there for a reason. Because
Yeah.
one, they got a lot of attention, and two, probably because they have a lot of marketing power behind them. And I know it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but when there's a lot of marketing power, that means they're putting a lot of effort in the product as well, right? You wouldn't market something you know is garbage.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say generally, I've never encountered a book that I found through the Audies that I didn't think should have won one. You know, I think they're all good. So,
Sarah, thank you so much.
yeah, no problem.
That was Sarah Hillis, our regular contributor, here to talk about the Audies. And that's all the time we have for this episode. If you want to leave us some feedback, you can do so by calling us at 1-866-509-4545, or you can leave us an email at feedback@ami.ca. And seriously, please tell us anything you want to share with us. We want to hear from you. But that's all the time. Thank you so much. I'm Jacob Szymanski. You were listening to AMI Audiobook Review.